Okay, so imagine for a second, imagine you own a bakery.
Okay.
And it's not just, any old bakery. This is a family legacy. You've put your heart, your soul, everything into this place.
Right. I'm with you.
You're up at 4 a.m. every single morning, way before the rest of the city's even thinking about waking up.
Yeah.
You're mixing the flour, the yeast, the water. You need all this dough until your arms ache.
A labor of love.
Absolutely. And you bake exactly 1,000 loaves of this perfect golden brown artisan bread. You can almost smell it, right? That warm, yeasty smell that just makes you hungry instantly.
Oh, yeah. I know exactly where this is going, and it's already painful.
It gets so much worse. You load these 1,000 perfect loaves onto your delivery truck. The driver heads off to the supermarket, fighting through city traffic, burning gas.
Yeah.
But by the time that truck gets to the store, the driver opens the back doors and
Yeah.
500 loaves are gone. Just vanished. Poof, into thin air.
That would be a very, very short-lived bakery.
Right, you'd be bankrupt in a month. You couldn't pay for the flour, couldn't pay the rent, couldn't pay your staff. But here's the crazy thing.
What's that?
That exact scenario is happening in the water industry every single day.
Yeah.
In major cities all over the world. It's a phenomenon called non-revenue water, or NRW. And we are not talking about a dripping tap here and there. We're talking about millions upon millions of gallons of treated drinkable water that is produced, pumped, put into the pipes.
But never generates a single cent of revenue for the utility.
1 cent.
It is arguably the single biggest efficiency gap in modern infrastructure. It's water that leaks into the ground, gets stolen, or it vanishes in what I like to call the fog of data.
The fog of data.
Yeah.
I like that. And the scale of this mystery is it's wild. I was looking at the background data we have in this deep dive, specifically referencing the global stats from Wikipedia.
Yeah.
In a place like Singapore, which is sort of the gold standard for utility management, they've managed to wrestle this number down to about 5%.
Which is incredible, truly world-class.
That's incredibly efficient.
Yeah.
That's like losing, maybe a few crumbs from your 1,000 loaves?
Right, but then you have to look at the other end of that spectrum. You look at a place like Lagos, Nigeria, pre-2003. The NRW levels there were hitting 96%.
Wait, 96?
Yes, 96, which is just, it's mind-boggling.
That means the system was basically producing water almost exclusively to lose it.
That's exactly it. It's like running that bakery where the conveyor belt just dumps 960 loaves directly into a trash can, and you only manage to sell 40.
That is it's completely unsustainable. And today, we're doing a deep dive into a very specific, very high-stakes battle against this invisible enemy. We are looking at Ghana, specifically the Accra East region, and the massive overhaul work being done by Ghana Water Limited.
And this is such a fascinating case study because it isn't just about, sending a guy out with a wrench to tighten a bolt. This is a total system overhaul. We're looking at physical engineering, a massive digital transformation, and a pretty intense financial crackdown.
We have a huge stack of sources to get through today. We've got technical reports from SMEC, that's the engineering consultancy managing the project. We have research on pipe durability from Utah State University. We've got soil data from ISRIC, pressure management physics from Water 21, and some really, really interesting GIS case studies from ESRI.
And you've got the financial side, too, reports from the World Bank and these crucial tariff decisions from Ghana's Public Utilities Regulatory Commission.
But there is a specific lens we really want to apply to all of this today. We came across this white paper by Kojo Andy, who's a data architect at NeoDataNet Research for Konnect Water Solutions.
Right.
And his argument is just fascinating. He basically posits that you can't fix what you can't see.
Exactly. It's the core of the problem.
He outlines this comprehensive data architecture system that's designed purely to reduce uncertainty. Whether it's detecting a leak, predicting how long a pipe will last, managing resources, it all comes down to the quality of your data fidelity.
And that is going to be our golden thread today. Because when you're losing 40 or 50% of your water, you are operating in a total fog. Is it a leak? Is it a thief? Is it just a broken meter? You don't know.
You're just guessing.
You're guessing. And Kojo Andy's research suggests that if you build the right data architecture, you can clear that fog. And once you can see the problem clearly, you can actually start to fight it.
So the mission for this deep dive is to unpack how Ghana Water Limited is trying to clear that fog. And the stakes are incredibly high. The SMEC project in Accra East, it has a target to save 23,000 cubic meters of water per day by December 2024.
Just to put that in perspective for you, 23,000 cubic meters, that is roughly 9 Olympic-sized swimming pools.
Every single day.
Every single day. That is a river of treated drinkable water that is currently disappearing into the ground or somewhere else.
And it's not just about the money, though we will definitely talk about the economics of it.
No, and this is the part that really, really gets me. It's about equity. That's the word we need to keep in our minds.
Explain that.
Every single drop that leaks out of a pipe into the dirt or gets stolen by, say, a commercial car wash that's bypassing a meter, that is a drop that doesn't reach a family at the end of the line. We're talking about people who are waking up at 3 in the morning just to fill a bucket because the pressure is so low the rest of the day.
So this is about social justice, in a way.
In a very real way, yeah.
So let's properly define the enemy here. We keep saying non-revenue water, but what does that actually look like on the ground?
Well, if you look at the taxonomy that's laid out by the International Water Association, which is referenced in our Wikipedia source NRWs, basically the difference between the system input volume.
So what you pump into the system.
Right. The total amount of water you produce and treat. The difference between that and the billed authorized consumption.
What people actually pay for.
Exactly. But it's what's inside that gap that's so important.
Okay, let's unpack that, because I think most people, when they hear water loss, they just picture a geyser shooting up out of the pavement, like in the movies.
That's the Hollywood version of water loss for sure. But in reality, you have to categorize the loss correctly if you ever hope to fix it. Broadly, you've got two huge buckets.
Okay.
First, you have what are called real losses. This is the physical stuff.
This is the wet water loss, the actual H2O leaking out.
Exactly. Leaks in the big transmission mains that carry water from the dam, leaks in the big storage tanks, or leaks in the service connection that runs from the street right up to the customer's meter. If the ground is wet, it's a real loss.
Simple enough.
But then you have the second bucket, which is arguably more insidious.
And that would be the apparent losses.
Right. These are what you could call paper water losses. The water successfully reaches the customer. They consume it, they take a shower with it, they make tea, but the utility never gets paid for it.
So the water exists on the consumption side, but the revenue just vanishes from the books.
It vanishes. And this is where that data architecture concept from Kojo Andy becomes so critical, because an apparent loss isn't a plumbing problem, it's an information problem.
Precisely. Give us an example of an apparent loss.
Unauthorized consumption, that's the big one. Theft. Someone tapping into the main illegally before the meter.
Okay.
Or metering inaccuracies. The meter is just old, maybe it's clogging up with sediment, and it's reading 10% less than what is actually flowing through it.
So the customer is paying, but they're not paying for everything they're using.
Right. Or it could be even simpler, just bad data handling. The meter reader writes down the wrong number, or the billing system has a glitch and misses an invoice.
And here's the kicker. I saw this in the World Bank estimate. In developing countries, these apparent losses, the theft and the data errors, they account for about 40% of the total non-revenue water.
It's a staggering number, isn't it?
It's huge.
Yeah.
Nearly half the problem isn't even about the plumbing. It's about information management.
Which is exactly why Kojo Andy's research is so relevant. If your data architecture can't distinguish between a slow meter and a physical leak, you're going to send a plumber to fix a spreadsheet error.
Or a data analyst to fix a burst pipe.
Exactly. You're just wasting resources. You're fighting the wrong enemy because you're in that fog.
Now, let's bring this to the Ghana context. We saw in the PURC tariff report, that's the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission, the Ghana Water Limited has system losses estimated around, 43 to 47%?
Yeah, in that range.
That's a huge chunk of their production.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something earlier that I think is really important, that focusing on the percentage might actually be a trap.
It is. It's a very seductive metric because it's easy to explain to the public. We lost 45%. It fits neatly in a headline.
Sure.
But from an engineering and a data standpoint, it's deeply flawed.
Okay, walk us through the math on that. Why is a percentage so misleading?
Okay, so just think about the equation, right? The percentage is the volume of loss divided by the total system input.
Loss over total. Got it.
Now, imagine it's a really, really hot summer. Everyone is thirsty. Everyone is watering their gardens. The total system input, the denominator, goes way up to meet that demand.
Okay, so the bottom number in the fraction gets bigger.
Right. But the leak in the pipe that's buried underground, that hole stays the same size. It's leaking the exact same volume of water per hour. But because you are pumping more total water through the system,
the percentage of loss mathematically goes down.
Exactly.
So you could technically pat yourself on the back and say, hey, we reduced our NRW from 45% to 40%, but you didn't actually fix a single leak. You just sold more water.
Precisely. It completely masks the underlying inefficiency of the network. That's why the experts, including the IWA, they prefer metrics like the Infrastructure Leakage Index, or ILI,
And what's that?
or even simpler, liters per service connection per day. It measures the actual volume lost per kilometer of pipe. That tells you the true physical condition of your infrastructure, regardless of how much water people are buying that month.
That makes so much more sense. It's about measuring the performance of the actual asset, not just the balance sheet.
It's a much sharper tool.
And speaking of assets, let's move to part 2 of our outline here, the physical battleground. Because even with the best data in the world, you still have physical pipes in the ground. And in Accra, like in so many places, those pipes are failing.
They are, and we have this really fascinating study from Utah State University in our stack. Now, this study looked at water main break rates across the U.S. and Canada, but the physics and the material science apply globally.
There was one statistic from that study that just jumped right out at me immediately. The average age of a failing water main is 47 years.
47 years. That puts us right back in the late 1970s. And the problem is a lot of our infrastructure, not just in North America, but in places like Ghana too, it relies on these older materials that were installed decades and decades ago.
And what's killing them?
The study highlights that corrosion is the absolute killer for cast iron and ductile iron pipes.
You know, I was surprised by that because you think of iron as strong, right? It feels permanent. I mean, we had an iron age for a reason, but the Earth itself actually eats it.
It does. It's a classic electrochemical reaction. It's basically a very, very slow motion battery. The soil acts as the electrolyte, the pipe is the electrode, and over time, the metal ions just migrate away into the dirt.
Wow.
You get this process called graphitization, where the iron literally leaches out and it leaves behind this brittle graphite matrix. The pipe might look solid from the outside, but if you were to tap it with a hammer,
It would shatter.
it shatters like glass. It has no structural integrity left.
And this is where we can bring in that soil grids data from ISRIC.
Right.
Because you can't just talk about the pipe. You have to talk about what the pipe is sitting in.
Exactly. This is another critical layer of that data architecture Kojo Andy talks about. You absolutely need to overlay your pipe data with your soil data.
Why? What properties of soil matter?
Yeah. Well, soil has specific properties. Its pH level, its texture, so is it sand, silt, or clay? Does it have a lot of coarse fragments? If you have highly acidic soil or soil with high salinity and you bury a metal pipe in it, you are basically putting that pipe in a slow-motion acid bath.
So applying this logic of reducing uncertainty, a utility like Ghana Water Limited could theoretically take their network map
Yep.
and overlay it with this ISRIC soil map.
Yes. The ISRIC source mentions that machine learning is now being used to map these soil properties globally at a 250-meter resolution.
That's incredibly precise for a global data set.
It's amazing. So you could identify exactly which sections of your old iron pipe are sitting in these high corrosion zones, and you could predict failures before they even happen.
That is the holy grail of asset management right there. Moving from being reactive, oh, look, there's a geyser erupting in the middle of the street, to being proactive.
Yeah.
This pipe is in a red zone soil, and it's 40 years old. Let's schedule it for replacement next week.
And the Utah State study found that when you do replace them, the material choice matters immensely. PVC pipe plastic has the lowest overall failure rate, far lower than cast iron, steel, or concrete.
Because plastic doesn't rust. It's that simple.
It doesn't corrode. In those aggressive soil environments, that material choice is the difference between a pipe lasting 100 years or failing in 20.
The study also mentioned something called trenchless technology.
Yeah, 74% of utilities are looking at this now.
Directional drilling.
Yeah.
I love this tech. It seems like magic.
It's crucial for dense urban environments. I mean, think about Accra. It's a dense, bustling city. The traffic is legendary.
You can't just shut down a major market road and dig an open trench for 2 weeks. It would cause chaos.
Total chaos. With directional drilling, you dig a small entry pit, you drill a small hole, you snake the new PVC pipe through underground, and you're done. It's far less disruptive and, in the long run, often cheaper.
But there's another physical factor at play here that I found really counterintuitive, and that's pressure. I always thought higher pressure is better, right? Everybody wants great shower pressure.
Right.
But the Water 21 source we have calls pressure a hidden killer of pipes.
Pressure is absolutely a double-edged sword. Yes, you need enough pressure to get water up to the 3rd floor of a building, of course. But any excess pressure is incredibly destructive. And here's where we get into some really interesting physics called the F odd concept.
FAVAD.
Okay.
Fixed and variable area discharges. Break that down for us, but keep it simple.
Okay. Imagine you have a nice, clean hole in a pipe. If that pipe is very rigid, like a thick steel pipe, that hole stays the same size regardless of the water pressure inside.
Okay.
If you double the pressure, the water comes out faster, sure, but the hole itself is the same. That's a fixed area discharge.
Okay, I'm with you so far.
But real-world networks are not that simple. They have long cracks, they have flexible plastic pipes, they have joints with rubber gaskets that can move.
Right.
In these cases, when you increase the pressure, you don't just push the water out faster. You actually force the material apart. You stretch the crack. You physically expand the hole.
Oh, I see. So the hole itself gets bigger because of the higher pressure.
Exactly. This is the variable area part of FAVAD, and the math behind this uses something called the N1 exponent.
The N1 exponent.
Right. For a standard rigid hole, N1 is around 0.5. But for flexible pipes or longitudinal cracks, that N1 exponent can be 1.5 or even higher.
Which means the leak doesn't just grow linearly, it grows exponentially.
Yes. If you have a high N1 exponent in your system, a small increase in pressure can cause a massive increase in leakage. You are literally blowing open your own infrastructure from the inside.
It's like the pipe is breathing, expanding to let water out when pressure is high, and then closing up a bit when it drops.
That's a great analogy. So if you're Ghana Water Limited and you're managing this big, complex network with a mix of materials and likely a lot of old cracks, simply turning down the pressure, maybe at night when usage is low, could save a huge amount of water.
How much are we talking about?
Massive amounts. The source mentions a case study in Sao Paulo, Brazil. They installed pressure-reducing valves to manage this night flow, and they saved 260 million liters per day.
160 million.
Per day. That is not from fixing a single pipe. That is just from smartly managing the physics of the pressure in the system. It's smart management versus just hard labor.
And once again, this links right back to the data architecture. You need sensors. You have to know what the pressure is at the critical nodes in your network 24/7.
You can't manage what you don't measure. If you don't have that real-time pressure data feeding into your central system, if you have that uncertainty that Kojo Andy talks about, you are flying completely blind.
You could be blowing out your own pipes at 3 a.m. when demand drops and the pressure spikes.
And you wouldn't even know it until the pipe finally bursts and you get that geyser in the street.
So we have the physical pipes, the soil they sit in, and the pressure running through them. Now let's talk about the map itself. This is part 3, the digital transformation. Because there was this incredible anecdote in the S resource about the address problem in Ghana.
Oh, this is one of those things that people in highly structured Western cities just take for granted. You know, 123 Main Street is a very specific, unambiguous point on a map.
Right.
But in many parts of Accra, especially in the fast-growing, less formal sprawl, there wasn't a functional, standardized address system for a very long time.
The story in the source that got me was that Ghana Water Limited staff sometimes had to ask the customer for a ride to their own house.
Yes,
Yeah.
because there was no way to give verbal directions. It was all turn left at the big mango tree, then go past the blue kiosk.
It sounds kind of funny, but from an operational standpoint, it must be an absolute nightmare.
A total nightmare. It led to what they call mixed walks.
Mixed walks.
Yeah.
What's that?
So, a walk is the designated route a meter reader takes every month. Because they didn't have precise geospatial data for their customers, they would sometimes assign a new customer account to the wrong administrative area.
So you have a meter reader who is responsible for, say, Zone A.
But the customer they're supposed to read is actually physically located in Zone B. The reader can't find the house, or they just have to estimate the bill, or worse, the bill never arrives at all.
That is a classic apparent loss caused by nothing more than bad data architecture. The water is there, the customer is there, but the informational link between them is broken.
Precisely. So DWL partnered with Tensing GIS Consulting and Esri to implement a full geospatial tech stack, ArcGIS Enterprise, field maps, Survey 123, a complete overhaul.
And what does the new workflow look like? How does this actually change the day-to-day for their staff?
It's a total transformation. It starts the moment a customer applies for a new connection. Instead of just writing a name on a paper form that might get lost or filed incorrectly,
Right.
the staff creates a project zone on a digital map.
So the customer is essentially a GPS coordinate from day one.
Yes. A work order is then automatically generated from that coordinate. The field staff uses a mobile app to go to that exact spot on the map. They validate the location. They even map the proposed route the pipe will take before they start digging.
That's smart.
And here's the kicker. The account number for that customer is now generated automatically. based on the geospatial coordinates of the property.
Wow, so the account number itself is intrinsically tied to the physical location on Earth.
Which completely prevents duplicates. It prevents those mixed walks. It creates a single, unimpeachable source of truth. If the house is at those coordinates, that is its account number, period. End of story.
This is the absolute embodiment of Kojo Andy's research, isn't it?
Yeah.
Reducing uncertainty through a robust data architecture, you're eliminating the human error of, I think the house is somewhere over there.
And the results were immediate. They dramatically reduced the turnaround time for getting new connections, and most importantly, the billing data became accurate. When you know exactly where every single one of your customers is.
You can overlay that with your supply network map.
And then you can start to do really powerful things like islanding.
Islanding, what do you mean by that?
It's a technique where you hydraulically isolate a specific zone, an island in your network. You put a meter on the main pipe going in, and you measure exactly how much water flows into that island over, say, 24 hours.
And then you just add up the bills from all the customers inside that island.
You add up all the meter readings, and if the numbers don't match...
Then you know you have a leak.
Oh!
Or you have a thief.
Exactly.
Which brings us perfectly to part 4, the enforcement war. Because sometimes the water isn't just leaking into the ground, it's being actively taken.
This is the revenue enhancement side of the equation. We have a report here from Ghana Web about the formation of the National Revenue Enhancement Teams, or NRET.
This sounded like something out of a police procedural show. The managing director of GWL at the time, Dr. Clifford Brahma, he formed these special teams, and they just went on a blitz.
They did. Between August and September of 2025, in just 6 weeks, they uncovered 4.4 million Ghana cedis in illegal losses.
In just 6 weeks. And that was only in the Accra and Tema regions.
It's a huge amount of revenue to recover in such a very short window. It really just shows you the sheer scale of the theft that was happening.
So how were people stealing the water? What are the common methods?
Well, there are a few classics. The meter bypass is probably the most common. You have the service pipe coming in from the main. It splits. One line goes to the meter, as it should.
In the other.
The other line goes around the meter and then rejoins the house plumbing on the other side. You just keep the valve on the bypass open and the valve to the meter closed. Water flows, the meter doesn't spin.
Simple, but I guess effective.
Then you have straightforward meter tampering. People try to reverse the gears or jam the mechanism with a pin so it runs slow. But the one that really stood out in the report, the one that's particularly damaging, is the use of inline booster pumps.
Yeah, explain that. Why is that one so nasty?
Okay, so imagine the water pressure in the main is already low, maybe because of all the physical leaks we just talked about. The water is barely trickling out of your tap.
A common problem in many areas.
So a customer goes and installs a suction pump directly on their incoming service pipe. They use it to literally suck water out of the public main to fill their private storage tank.
They're actively pulling water from the grid, not just taking what flows.
Right. But by creating that suction, they create negative pressure in the main pipe outside their house. They are literally sucking the water away from their neighbors.
No.
If you are the house next door, your tap just goes completely dry because your neighbor's pump is hogging all the available flow. It's a beggar thy neighbor tactic, and it's incredibly antisocial.
That is brutal. It really highlights that this isn't a victimless crime against some faceless utility. It's theft from your own community.
And it gets even worse than that. It introduces a massive contamination risk. If you suck hard enough on a leaky pipe and that pipe is buried in dirty groundwater or, sewage-contaminated soil.
You can pull that contamination into the clean water pipe.
Yes. Through the cracks. The process is called back siphonage or intrusion. So now you're potentially contaminating the public supply for everyone else down the line. It's a major, major public health hazard.
The Ghana Web article also mentioned a local unit of measurement that I think is really important for context, the Kufor gallon.
Yes. This is the iconic yellow 25-liter container you see everywhere in Ghana. It's named after the former president, John Kufor, from a time in the early 2000s when water shortages were really severe and everyone had to carry these jerry cans to get water.
And the data we have showed that a typical household of 4 consumes about 1 cubic meter of water every 2 weeks.
Which is about 1,000 liters. So if you do the math, that's 40 Kufor gallons a week.
Just visualize that for a second. A family having to haul 40 of those heavy yellow containers every single week just to cook, clean, and drink.
That is the daily reality of water access when the pipe system doesn't work reliably.
And this brings up what you might call the Robin Hood dilemma. We're talking about cracking down on theft, recovering millions of CDs. But we also know that 27% of GWL's customers use less than 20 cubic meters. These are low-income users.
Right.
So is cracking down on them really ethical? Are they just desperate?
It's the hardest question in utility management, bar none. Is water a human right, or is it a commodity? And the answer, of course, is that it's both.
So how do you square that circle?
The managing director of GWL, Adam Mutawakilu, makes a very strong argument in the source material. He says, and I'm paraphrasing here, every drop of water lost to theft is a drop denied to a community that needs it.
His point being that theft ultimately breaks the entire system for everyone.
Exactly. If the utility is bleeding 4.4 million CDs every 6 weeks from just one region, they cannot afford to buy the chemicals to treat the water properly. They cannot afford to replace those 47-year-old iron pipes. And crucially, they cannot afford to extend the network to the new, poor neighborhoods that have no piped water at all.
So the theft might help one individual get free water today.
But it ensures that their entire community stays water poor forever.
It's a classic tragedy of the commons.
It is. That's the equity argument. The poor and vulnerable suffer the most when the utility fails. The rich can always afford to buy water from tanker trucks. The rich can drill private boreholes. It's the poor who rely on the public pipe. So protecting the financial and physical integrity of that pipe is actually a pro-poor policy.
This connects directly to the financial framework. Let's get into part 5. We have the source from the PURC, the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission. They approved a tariff increase.
Yes, a 15.92% increase for the 2026-2030 period.
Now, as a consumer, I would hate hearing about a price hike, especially if the service I'm getting is spotty. I'd be asking, why am I paying more when you guys are still losing 45% of the water?
And that is a totally valid frustration. It makes perfect sense. But if you look at the utilities' regulated asset base, basically the total value of all their infrastructure, it desperately needs investment. And the tariff decision actually builds in specific benchmarks for NRW.
What do you mean it's built into the price?
So the regulator sets a benchmark for acceptable losses, say 43% for 2025, with a target to move to 47.14% later, which actually acknowledges the ongoing struggle. It's a recognition of reality. If the regulator just said, your target is 10% next year, the utility would go bankrupt because they simply can't achieve it that fast.
It's a way of setting a realistic, incremental goal.
Exactly. But GWL isn't doing this alone. This is where SMEC comes in. They have this performance-based contract. And this seems like a really different way of doing business compared to the usual consulting gig.
How so?
Well, traditionally, a government might hire a consultant to advise them on a problem. The consultant comes in, they write a long report, they get paid their fee, and they leave. But the leaks are still there.
Right, the classic thick binder on the shelf syndrome. Nothing actually changes.
Exactly. A performance-based contract, or a PBC, is completely different. The contractor is paid based on results. In this case, the result is saved water. SMAC is acting as the client's representative to ensure the contractor actually delivers on that 23,000 cubic meters per day reduction.
So if the water loss doesn't go down, they don't get their full payout.
That's the core of it. It aligns the incentives perfectly. It forces everyone to look at the data, again, back to Kojo Andy's architecture. You need to prove the water was saved. You need verified baselines and accurate measurements. You can't just guess. It brings real accountability to the engineering.
We also have the World Bank report on the Gamma Sanitation and Water Project. Because we can't really talk about water supply without also talking about where it all goes, sanitation.
They are two sides of the exact same coin. You pump clean water in, you have to manage the wastewater that comes out. The Gamma project has been incredibly successful on this front. Over 35,000 improved toilets have been constructed.
And the report specifically highlights a focus on low-income communities and rental accommodations. Something like 25,486 units in rental properties.
And that's critical because landlords often have very little incentive to pay to install proper toilets for their tenants. The project subsidized this, and they use this interesting biodigester technology.
How does that work? Is it just a fancy septic tank?
It's a bit smarter than a standard septic tank. It uses biological processes, specifically anaerobic digestion, to break down the waste right there on site. The microorganisms basically eat the organic matter. The source says they removed 114 tons per year of BOD pollution load this way.
BOD. What's that?
Biological oxygen demand. It's a scientific measure of how much oxygen is needed to break down the pollution in a body of water. High BOD means the water is filthy, and it kills fish and aquatic life. So by treating this waste in biodigesters, they're keeping that pollution out of the open drains and ultimately out of the ocean.
And there was a specific metric in that report about gender impact that I found really powerful.
The decrease in missed school days for girls.
The target was an 85% reduction. Why is that so important?
It's a well-known issue in international development. If a school doesn't have a decent, private, and safe toilet, teenage girls will often just stay home during their period. They miss a week of school every single month.
And that accumulates over a year.
It accumulates massively. They fall behind in their studies. By building proper sanitation facilities in schools, you aren't just managing waste. You are literally keeping girls in school. You are changing the trajectory of their future.
It's just amazing how water connects to absolutely everything. Corrosion chemistry, software architecture, financial contracts, and girls' education.
It is the fundamental foundation of civilization, and when it starts to leak, the whole foundation begins to crack.
So let's try to synthesize all of this. We've covered a lot of ground here. If we look at the Accra East project as a kind of blueprint for fighting this missing water mystery, what are the key pillars?
I see 4 main pillars, and I think they all have to stand together. You can't just do one of them.
Okay, what's the first one?
First is materials. We learned from Utah State and ISRIC that you can't just bury iron pipe in acidic soil and cross your fingers. You need to be smart, switch to materials like PVC, and use soil mapping to guide your replacement strategy.
Right, engineering the foundation correctly.
Second is physics. That's the Water 21 insight. You have to actively manage pressure. You have to tame that N1 exponent. If you just pump harder and harder into a leaky system, you're just making the holes bigger.
The third pillar has to be data.
Exactly. This is the Kojo Andy focus, the Esri GIS solution. You need to know where your customers are. You need to know where your pipes are. You have to reduce that uncertainty so you can finally distinguish between a physical leak, a commercial theft, and a simple data entry error.
And the fourth pillar?
I'd say it's culture. That's the enforcement side and the financial side combined. It's about changing the entire mindset from water is free and I can take what I want to water is a valuable and essential service that keeps my community alive.
And that involves both the NRW crackdown, but also the equitable tariffs and the sanitation improvements that show the utility is delivering value.
Yes. It's the stick and the carrot.
It's just a massive undertaking, saving 23,000 cubic meters a day.
It is, but they are actually doing it. They're on the path.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. We've talked a lot about the utility losing water and money. But there is a concept that the experts use called URL.
Unavoidable annual real losses.
What is that?
Right. It's the idea that even the most perfect system, built with golden pipes and flawless joints, will still leak a tiny little bit. There are always joints, there are vibrations from traffic. You can never get the leakage rate to absolute zero.
So the real economic question becomes, at what point does it cost more money to find and fix the next leak than the water you save is actually worth?
Exactly. If it costs you $100 to dig up the street and use advanced acoustic sensors to save $1 worth of water, do you do it?
Probably not.
Probably not. That point is called the economic level of leakage.
And for a place like Ghana, sitting at nearly 50% loss, they are a very long way from that theoretical limit. They have plenty of cheap water to save before they get there.
Oh, they do. They have a lot of low-hanging fruit to pick before they even have to start worrying about the law of diminishing returns.
But for you, listening to this, maybe you're in a city where the water just works. You turn the tap, clean water flows out. You don't think about the 47-year-old pipe under your street, or the soil acidity, or the pressure-reducing valves, or the data architects working in the background to make it all happen.
Well, maybe just check your own dripping tap tonight, because while the utility is fighting this huge battle for millions of cubic meters, that single drip in your sink is the only part of the entire vast system that you directly control. And in a world where fresh, clean water is becoming ever more scarce.
Every single drop counts.
It literally does.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll catch you on the next one.
Goodbye.